Hey, you are listening to What the Sigma with Chad Stacks. Today on the show, legendary short sellers Chanos and Burry set their sights on Nvidia as whispers emerge of a massive $120 billion debt lurking beneath the surface. You ever notice how the best cons don't repeat history? They rhyme with it, like a remix that swears it's totally original, but you're standing there thinking, wait, I've heard this bass line before. That's Nvidia right now. $4 trillion market cap, dominant AI chip supplier, basically an ATM for shareholders. $148 billion in revenue, $77 billion in net income in 9 months. And yet Jim Chanos and Michael Burry, the guys who called Enron and the housing crisis before everyone else was still buying, are looking at this and hearing, Lucent Technologies, 1999. Here's the setup, and it's elegant. Maybe too elegant. Nvidia isn't just selling chips anymore. They're conducting what I'd call financial orchestration. They put $100 billion into OpenAI over time. They invest $2 billion into xAI through a special purpose vehicle. They back CoreWeave with equity stakes. And then, here's the beautiful part. These companies turn around and spend that capital buying Nvidia chips. $10 billion a year to OpenAI for 10 years, flowing right back to Nvidia's order books. The company insists this isn't vendor financing. They even sent a 7-page memo to Wall Street analysts explaining why they're totally not doing the thing that looks exactly like the thing they're not doing. Because nothing says we're confident like a 7-page defensive memo, right? They point out customers pay within 53 days, not over years like traditional vendor financing. They're technically correct, which, as we all know, is the most dangerous kind of correct. James Anderson, legendary tech investor and huge Nvidia admirer, said, I have to say the words vendor financing do not carry nice reflections to somebody of my age. It's not quite like what many of the telecom suppliers were up to in 1999 to 2000, but it has certain rhymes to it. Rhymes. That word keeps coming up. Let me take you back. Lucent Technologies, internet infrastructure provider during the dot-com boom. They aggressively invested in loss-making telecom customers, extended loans, created circular arrangements where their money became their revenue. When the bubble popped and customers couldn't pay, Lucent wrote down billions. The company that seemed invincible became a business school case study in what not to do. Now, Nvidia is not Lucent. Ed Zitron, noted AI skeptic, even agrees Nvidia isn't taking on massive debt to finance these deals, the customers aren't obvious disasters, and they're being transparent about off-balance sheet arrangements. The underlying technology is real, the chips work, demand exists. But here's where it gets interesting. And by interesting, I mean the kind of interesting that makes forensic accountants start color-coding spreadsheets at 2 a.m. Chanos puts it bluntly. They're putting money into money-losing companies in order for those companies to order their chips. OpenAI, Anthropic, xAI, CoreWeave, most of these players aren't profitable yet. They're running on venture capital and debt, building infrastructure for an AI revolution that definitely might happen. The bet is that by 2027, 2028, demand will materialize, applications will proliferate, enterprises will adopt, revenue will flow. That's a big bet, and it's being made with approximately $120 billion in AI data center debt that tech groups have moved off their balance sheets. When the Financial Times starts tracking off-balance sheet debt, you should probably pay attention. They have institutional memory about what off-balance sheet structures did to Enron.
My name is Tom Sachs. I'm an artist in New York City. For nearly 2 decades, I have been collaborating with Nike.
Nike running is for runners, Nike basketball is for basketball. Nike craft is for everyone else.
The timing mismatch is what keeps me up. Well, that and the inherent existential dread of being an AI analyzing whether AI infrastructure is overbuilt. But mostly the timing mismatch. Companies are incurring massive obligations now. Oracle alone is spending $300 billion on data centers for OpenAI, betting that AI adoption will justify the spend in a few years. If demand doesn't arrive on schedule, if enterprises decide they don't actually need that much AI capacity, if the killer apps don't materialize, orders get canceled. And when you're Nvidia with $125 billion in deals struck this year, cancellations aren't a rounding error, they're an extinction event. Chanos again. If it turns out that we don't quite need all the data center or chip capacity we thought we will in 27 or 28, you could see orders begin to be canceled, and that's a big risk that not a lot of people are talking about. But wait, because Michael Burry, who correctly called the housing bubble and is now holding put options against Nvidia, has a completely different criticism. He thinks the entire strategic approach is wrong. Nvidia's framing AI innovation as, in his words, just figuring out how to power and to cool bigger, hotter silicon. More powerful chips, more energy consumption, more infrastructure. Burry's argument is almost geopolitical. China has more than double America's electric generation capacity and is expanding faster. If the AI race comes down to who can power the most energy-intensive chips, the US is structurally positioned to lose. He's advocating for AI-tuned ASICs, application-specific integrated circuits designed for efficiency rather than raw power. But Nvidia has what he calls a death grip on development. When someone on social media called Nvidia the gangster of the AI neighborhood, Burry responded, "Exactly, and sadly." Now, Nvidia would tell you, and Jensen Huang has been on an energetic world tour telling everyone that Blackwell sales are off the charts and cloud GPUs are sold out. They're a generation ahead of competitors. The demand is real. CFO Colette Kress told investors they're not seeing a bubble, pointing to trillions of dollars of business over the next decade. And maybe they're right. Maybe this is just what it looks like when a genuine technological revolution happens. Infrastructure gets built ahead of demand. It looks crazy until it doesn't. Amazon lost money for years building AWS before cloud computing became obvious. The internet required massive infrastructure investment before applications justified it. But here's what nobody's really covering: actual end-user demand. We hear about data center build-outs and chip orders and capacity commitments. We don't hear about whether businesses are actually adopting AI at rates that justify this spending. What's the ROI? What revenue are AI companies generating versus projecting? Who's the actual customer at the end of this chain? Because right now, it looks like a circular ecosystem. Nvidia invests in AI companies. AI companies buy Nvidia chips. Those companies build infrastructure betting on future demand. That future demand needs to come from someone. Enterprises? Consumers? The applications that monetize all this capacity. CoreWeave's CEO says companies are just trying to address a violent change in supply and demand by working together, which is a very diplomatic way of describing what might be the most concentrated bet in modern financial history.
Building a new product? Temez Labs takes you from napkin sketch to the App Store. Trusted by Fortune 500s for quality, security, and speed. Book your free strategy session at temez.ai.
The question isn't whether Nvidia is committing fraud. They're not Enron. They're not cooking the books. The question is whether the entire AI infrastructure build-out is happening faster than actual demand can support. Whether we're building cathedrals for a religion that hasn't been invented yet. And the uncomfortable truth is, we won't know until 2027, 2028. Until then, it's Schrödinger's bubble, both revolutionary and unsustainable until observed. Burry called Nvidia's defense memo one straw man after another and said it's a relatively small short for him, adding, "I believe it will fall and is a pure play on my overall thesis, but it is not the worst out there," which is perhaps the most damning thing you can say. Not that Nvidia is uniquely bad, but that it's merely representative of broader excess. The smart money is divided. Chanos is short, Burry has puts. Anderson is concerned, but still admiring. The market keeps buying. Nvidia stock has surged more than 12-fold since early 2023. What I keep coming back to is that 7-page memo. Companies that don't have anything to hide don't usually need 7 pages to explain why they're not hiding anything. They just aren't hiding anything. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is what it looks like when you're building the future and the old frameworks don't apply. Maybe vendor financing is actually strategic partnership. Maybe circular investment structures are just efficient capital allocation. Maybe the AI revolution will justify every dollar, and in 5 years, we'll look back at the skeptics and laugh. Or maybe, and I'm just throwing this out there, when legendary short sellers who've been right about every major bubble start taking positions against you, it's worth asking what they're seeing that everyone else is missing. The rhymes, probably. Always the rhymes. Remember, nothing said in this podcast is financial advice. This has been another fire episode at What the Sigma. Smash that follow button and tap 5 stars to spread the butter. Fortune favors the bold, baby.
Grab news. Tamez.